Okay, so just to refresh, we are looking at the sample functions.php file in week 1 folder, and the source code here, and it's kind of small for the screen, but if you had brought it up in front of you, you could see it. You can try to make it a little bit bigger by doing this. Okay, that might be better. Okay, so let me scroll over a little bit. Okay, the first function I have up here, which is commented out, is the phpinfo. This is a fantastic function. I highly encourage you to use it in non-production systems. In production, it gives away too much information about your system, and hackers will delight in their ability to mess your system up. So don't leave it out there in production. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, first thing we're doing is we're generating 3 random numbers, R, G, and B. RGB stands for red, green, blue, right? We're picking random numbers between 120 and 255 for R, 120 and 200 for G, and 180 and 255 for blue. So we're getting 3 random numbers, and we're using the rand function. Now, how do you get information about the rand function? You go to php.net. That's the best way. And php.net has looked the same for 10 years since I've been using it, so they haven't changed anything. And you can easily search for any function, and the default is in the function list. So if you type in the word rand, up comes a description of the rand function, right? Or what was the one that you guys are having? The round function. Remember, for homework, you could have looked it up here. So go to php.net, type in your function, and what you get is int rand, and then there's a description. Either you can leave nothing in here, which will give you a random number between 0 and 1, or if you use 2 arguments of type integer, it'll give you a random number, an integer between a minimum and a maximum. And the result is it'll generate a random integer. That's the point. Okay? So it's that easy to look things up. Okay, the next line will create a string that will allow us to modify the background color of the page. About 8 lines down, you'll see a body tag, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so here's another. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is. Can somebody interpret that for me? This body equals body style background RGB. This is HTML. This is HTML. It's not PHP. A body style, you can set the body or the background color by using RGB values. So like 100, 200, 250 will create the background according to those specifications of red, green, blue. All right, so what we're doing basically is we're filling in the random numbers here into there. And then here's quick print, right? In the actual HTML, we're quick printing that string. All right, if you want to view the source, let's take a look at the, I'll bring up another version of this. If you view the source, you see here's, in this iteration, that's what your body tag looked like. It was body style equals background RGB, and then those 3 numbers, 188, 198, 255. Right? Okay. Okay, the next few lines assume you have a folder in your public HTML directory called data, and that the data folder is group writable for the Apache group. What the hell does that mean? Well, the web server, remember the Apache program is what's serving up these web pages, and for security on the system, the Apache web server runs as the Apache user with group membership of Apache. So ultimately, in order for the Apache web server to serve up data from your directories, it has to have permission. That's what it's basically saying. And if it needs to write to a file, which is never a good idea unless you want it to, in order for it to write information back, it has to have write access to that particular file or directory. So there is a file called count.txt in the data subdirectory that has write permissions to the Apache user, right? And without getting into too much detail, I've taken care of that. We can go back and worry about how to do that later. But here's the code that accomplishes that. Num is equal to file get contents of data count.txt. If you looked at count.txt, let me bring up my putty. I did an ls, right, and I got count.txt. In fact, let me clear this out. Try it again. If I do an ls minus l, what this is, the ownership of the file is entirely me, right? But this last RW means that everybody else on the system can theoretically write to that file as well, including the Apache user. So that's what's permitting it to get written to. And if you look at the contents, the cat command on the system just displays a file, 1595. So that's the current value of count.txt. This will get file get contents of that file and store it in the variable num. Make sense? So num, at this iteration, num is equal to 1595. And it prints out this page has been accessed 1595 times. Then, what does this do? Increments 1, so 1596, which we could have also used. Give me two other ways to do this line. Test question. $num plus plus. Plus and $num, and what else? $num plus equals 1. $num plus equals 1. Three different ways to do this. And what do you suppose this does? It takes the current value of num and writes it back to that file. All right, so a lot going on there. And you say, well, wait a minute, I don't know, how do you use file gets contents, file put contents? Those are just PHP functions. So you go back to php.net, you search for file put contents, it gives you a very descriptive, functional description of how to use that file, and with examples. And every function there has examples. Okay, so that's that part of it. And then finally, some links for the semester. And then there's some other things also. There are some built-in variables that give you information about it. But let's go back to the functions. File mtime is a function for file modification time. You give it a file name, and that's the modification time. And then here's the date function, which is one of the most useful functions that you're going to use. The date function, which is not easy to, you got to get your head around, will take a time and format it any way you like. So what this is basically telling you is day, month, year, and then hours and minutes, AM, PM. I mean, it's a little bit complex, but it'll format a time in any format that you want. And look at the date page. Yes?
How do you do the military time?
Good question. Let's do the date function.
Read that.
So, but this is a great question. So, and feel free to use the date function in your project. Just you have to use some different formatting. Okay, do military time if you want. But let's go to this. Let's search for date. There's a date, there's a string format, and then there's a timestamp, which is what times are represented in, usually timestamps. Okay, so let's see. The format would be a lowercase d is day of the month, uppercase D is textual representation of the month, and let's talk about the times. Okay, capital G is 24-hour format without leading zeros. Capital H is 24-hour format with leading zeros. Okay, so 0 to 100 hours, you'd use a capital H. So let's do military. I'm going to modify my program now. I'm going to just use the VI editor for simplicity. sample functions. I'm going to scroll down here. Okay, so file last modified. The D, M, D, and Y are days, months, year, so I'm not going to touch that. Here's the time right there. How would we do military time? Does military use a colon or not? Anybody in the military? It's yeah, I'm just going to do capital H.
I think it's a colon.
I don't know. It's embarrassing that I don't know, but okay, so I'm going to use capital H.
I have to count every time it's military time.
And the I must have something to do with minutes. Let's check. Yeah, minutes with leading zeros. And so that should be it, right? And we'll even do write it and refresh it, and 1308. Okay, so yeah, you got some flexibility. So just become very attached to that php.net website for looking up functions. It's the best thing. And there's tons of examples, and there's tons of comments after the examples. So, you know, we're going to be looking at the mail function to actually send out mail from our PHP programs, and there's a lot of documentation built in. Okay? And I think that's it. For the only thing that's in question is this line right here. This file equals server, and then the square brackets, and then script file name. And that has to do, there is this server variable that we're going to take a look at right now. So let's get to that part of the text. And I think, let's see, I'm going to go to week 2 here. I do need a better navigation system. Okay, this info.php file, if you view the source code, it's simple. It's got one line, it's phpinfo. And phpinfo is a PHP function that provides you with more information about your system than you ever cared to know. All right, let me make this font a little bit smaller. That's probably good. It tells you what version of PHP, the build date, configure options, blah, blah. That's not really all that useful, that stuff.
It's all formatted right out of that function?
But yeah, the function creates this table. It shows you the Apache environment, which again, as you get more involved in this, you're going to want to know this stuff, at least some of it. So for instance, it shows that the server name is CSN Linux, the server software is Apache. You could also be using Windows IIS or any other number of things. Document root, the remote address, that's where the client's coming from. You guys should all see a different remote address. The server address, on and on and on and on and on. Okay, headers information. Next, you get a whole bunch of different things that are built in to PHP on this build. For instance, curl allows you to grab HTTP pages and just put them into your code or dissect them. The date function's built in. The MySQL, which we're going to be using quite a bit. So it has little bindings to a database, and so on and so forth. So more stuff than you'd ever want. Okay, this is where I wanted to get to. PHP variables. These are the variables that are associated with this particular script that's being run. And notice that if you wanted to know programmatically what the host name of the person is that's accessing your program, you would access it through _server remote address. And let me put that into this example here. All right, into the student's PHP page. I'll get my, I'm still editing the file, right? Let me just do one more line here. Print client IP address is, oh, I should probably do a line break, is, colon, close my quote, dot, what does dot do? Remember?
It's concatenating.
Concatenates two strings, so this is a string. And now I'm going to access that variable that we were just talking about, which is server remote address, right? In fact, I'm going to just copy this. And the only thing that's kind of weird, I don't understand why they do this, but it's just you get used to it. That should actually start with a $sign. That's a variable, and all variables have to start with a $sign. So $sign server remote address.
Is it? What's with the quote at the end?
Okay.
What's with the quote at the end?
Quote and here?
Yeah, ADDR.
It's actually, that should be on one line. Let me just do. Let me break it up into separate lines here, so it's more accessible. Okay, the client IP address is, close your quote, dot. There's a variable, and without getting too far ahead of myself, $_ server is what we call an array. It's an array of different options, and this is one of the possible values inside that array, and that needs to be in quotes. And then let me dot at the end of it, and then do a line break at the end also, and a new line. Okay. So I've just incorporated that server variable into my program. I'm going to exit. Oops. And let's take a look at the result. Okay, and all of you should see a different client IP address. So now you have access to everybody who's touching your program. You can kind of maybe write that out. My program was touched by, 24.35, whatever. Okay, so you have a running list of who's accessing your pages, and you can also maybe say, if this guy is hammering away at your pages, or let's say you created a website that's accepting comments, and there's one I can say, right, asshole. There's one asshole that always gives you real negative, nasty comments and messes up your site. Well, if you got his IP address, you just say, if server remote address equals 10.1.1.9, exit. He doesn't have access to your site anymore. You'll be amazed at how often you want to use that. The power that comes with PHP. All right, so anyway, that's available inside, and these are, and so at any given time, you can get information about your file, your program, your environment. Okay. Oh, and these are environment variables also. We'll talk about that maybe. I don't use that a lot of times. HTTP refer. This is handy to have. It shows you where your or the link that the person clicked to get to your page. And it's always interesting to see where people are coming from, and that's available in the HTTP refer variable under the $sign server. Okay, any questions?
I've got one question. How when someone fill things out on their website, can they take that information and put it in a different site?
The answer is always yes. It just depends. I'm not positive though. So you're saying they fill out a form, right?
Yep.
They submit it. It gets written where?
To a different HTML file.
Oh yeah, you can write it to a different. You can write it anywhere you want. You can write it to a database, to a file. Are you saying writing it to a different server?
No,
different. Oh yeah, different. Sure, absolutely. We can write it to a text file, HTML.
Okay.
You're probably going to want to write it to a database, though. Okay. So as we get through the semester, you'll store all this stuff in a database. Very nice. Okay. So that's phpinfo, and that's just kind of an introduction to functions. Okay. How are we doing for time? Okay, we're getting towards the end here. So. I've talked about the project. Let me hand out the notes, because I'm probably not going to do a lot with this, since you can learn it on your own. But this is Note Packet 4. Did I satisfactorily answer your questions for Note Packet 3? Probably, right? Yeah. What was Note Packet 3? Oh, strings and variables, right. So, what's the difference between single and double quotes?
Singular, literal.
Singular, literal. Doubles, what does doubles allow you to include?
Variables.
Variables directly. What else?
Function.
Like new lines. Not functions. Not functions. That's important. So you can't embed a function inside a double quoted or a single quoted string. You have to get a function, you have to break out of the string, do a dot, then the function, and then break back in. All right? That's that. You can use single quotes inside double quotes and double quotes inside single quotes. Yep. All right. But if you're going to use a function, you have to break out. Or what you could do is let a variable equal that function value and then embed the variable. Does that make sense?
I think that's right.
Yeah. So, okay. Single and double quotes, variable names, double quoted strings. Yeah, that's pretty easy. Numbers and operators. On the exam, I think I give you one question on basic math operations, order of operations, one on the remainder. Nothing serious. Look at those examples. You should be in good shape. Okay. Good. And we didn't cover here docs, nor are we going to cover here docs. I won't hold you responsible for here docs on an exam. Okay? So you can erase that from your mind unless you're the obsessive compulsive type.
And are we going to get to that %.2f thing? Or
I'm also going to de-emphasize that, but it's in this note packet here.
Right.
So I can talk about it, right? Manipulating text, real easy. There's a bunch of functions that I want you to know. All right? Now on the exam, which is not coming up for a couple of, for weeks at this point. But just so you know, on your exams, you're allowed to write up a one-page cheat sheet, 8.5 by 11. Handwritten, you can write anything you want on there. So what I might recommend is simple examples of some of the functions that are in the notes. So on the exam, I would expect that you should be able to use the trim function or the string length function without any documentation because you have your cheat sheet. I'm de-emphasizing printf and sprintf, although you want to see them. You can cross that out as far as a required function. Look it up if you want. Okay, so, and we're not just doing this for fun. Oh, we're just part of it. A lot of the data that we get in our programs, in fact, most of it comes from the internet. And what should you trust about the internet?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. You should never trust any data that you get. Nothing. Somebody, and usually it could be malicious people out there, which is, they're trying to hack your system, or more likely, it's my mother who's trying to access your form. And what do you know about my mother? If anything can possibly go wrong, computer-wise, it will. So, in other words, if you have a form that's expecting a name, my mom will somehow embed a bunch of spaces before and after it, and it won't look right, and then it won't match up. So you got to assume that my mother is using your form and is going to do unexpected things. So when we talk about the functions on this page here, the purpose is not just to play around with functions, but to try to make sure our input is valid. And one of the functions we can use is the trim function. Trim returns a string with the white space removed. String length, strlen, returns the length of the string, including white space. So this example here shows a string 1 and string 2. String 1 is just the string. String 2 is the string with padding and a new line character. But if you do the string length on both of these, you'll notice that the string length of string 1 is 6, string. The string length of string 2 is 10. That includes the 3 spaces and the new line. But if you trim string 2 and set it equal to string 3, the trim function will take off all of the new line spaces in the front. It'll take off the new line at the end. It won't mess with any of the spaces in the middle, and also returns 6. So how does this protect against my mother? Well, if you want to do something like, input your name, and then she puts in Ginny with all her spaces and new lines and any other unexpected stuff in there. If you trim it out, and then you say if name equals Ginny, you know, print hi mom, right? You can do that because then all that garbage is out of there. By the way, well, I don't know if it's in this note packet or next, but when we talk about equivalents like one string equal to another, that'll become important. Okay, so for instance, validating a zip code. And this is a command line program, but enter a 5-digit zip code. $zip equals f gets stdin. It's just a simple, cheap way to grab input from the command line. I don't know, is this in, nope, is this in week 2? Yeah, zip.php. And I think that's the correct one. Oh, command line access to these, to the shared folder is under, geez, let's see. Let me go into, I might have given you a shortcut. Oh, yours has got a lot of stuff. Let's do, I didn't give, I'm going to, over the next couple of days, I'm going to give you a shortcut inside your public HTML that links directly to the shared folder, so you can just CD to share. But in a nutshell, if you CD home/share, you get to the shared folder, and then you can CD to week 2, home share week 2, and then zip.php, that's, oh, I changed it. Okay. So, tell you what, let's use this example instead of the one that's in the notes. Okay, so we're printing out H2 zip code and H2 heading. You entered get zip and get state. I don't know where this is. Oh, I know where this is coming from. Okay, this is actually a good learning experience here. Let me back up for a second and cat out zip.htm. This is in the week 2 folder. All right. Zip.htm is a pure HTML file, has an H1 header, and then this interesting tag form action equals zip.php. A form is just a way for a program to collect information from a user and then submit it to a processing program. This line basically says, take the data from this form and send it to zip.php. And then we have a couple of tags that collect the data. Input type equals text. It's a text input field with a name of zip. And the state line input type equals text, another text field with a name of state. An input type equals submit, which is the submit button, and then a closing tag for my form. Let's take a look at what this looks, and I encourage you, can you get up your share week 2 folder on your desktop? And I'm going to bounce out of this code because you can finish up the rest of this for homework, okay? And I will specifically, Paul, if I remember, I'll do a sprintf and printf short video.
All right.
Just so just to kind of get you up to speed, because I know it's killing you. Okay, so let's go to the zip.htm. So the source code is what I just showed you. And if you click on the zip.htm, it's not pretty, but it says enter zip code and state. Zip equals this, state equals this, and you submit. And what happened? Well, take a look at this. If you don't fill in anything, all right, and click submit, take a look at the URL of the processing program. What do you notice about it? Zip.php. Remember the question mark? That was that's separating the program from the data. Zip equals blank because we didn't put anything in there, and state equals blank. Where did the zip and the state come from? The zip and the state came from,
Empty fields.
yeah, these fields right here. Name equals zip, name equals state. It sent that data, or it didn't, non-data, to the zip program. So, let's go back. If we type in a zip now, 11111, and a state of New York, spelling errors included, submit. Notice that's what gets passed to that processing program.
It also does this is not valid versus this is valid.
Right, well that's in the code, but that's beside the point. What I'm trying to get to is every field in that zip.html folder that's inside the form will get passed via the URL to the processing program. And how does it know to send it to zip.php? I mean, how did it know to get here?
Because you linked it in the action.
That's the form action, right. That's the form action equals zip.php. So if I called that zipper.php, it would send it to zipper. And if I change these names, it would send it as different variables. All right. Now, how do we access that data? Well, we access that data. Now let's go into, let me clear this out, and let me cat out zip.php. You access that data, remember from last time, under the $get variables. Remember $_server where we just looked at the remote host, blah, blah, blah. $_get houses the zip and the state. So that's what allows us to print out you entered 11111 and New York.
See, when I did it in mine, Git, the first time around when I was just running the program itself, worked, but I had to use posts.
Yes, you do have to.
So I wasn't sure what the...
You do have to use quotes. Now there is...
No, post instead of...
Post. Yeah, post. Yeah. And that'll depend on the action. We'll get to that next time, all right? Let's just keep things simple. You should normally have quotation marks around the zip and the state, but because these are already embedded inside double quotes, we don't. All right. That's problematic. We'll get to that. Okay, so look at this. What does this line do? $zip equals trim get zip.
Trims the space out.
It trims off any white space. It protects against my mother. All right? And if string length of zip is equal to 5, and I'm not going to even talk about this. Don't worry about that. This looks like a valid zip code. All right? The preg match we get to towards the end of the semester that actually says, hey, you know what? It's got to have 5 digits. Digits for the \d, 5 of them. Don't worry about it. That's called regular expressions. This looks like a valid zip code. So, and otherwise the zip code's not valid. So if we go back here and we do what my mother would do, which is put a whole bunch of spaces in and not know it, it'll still trim it off. Because with all those spaces, the string length would have been like 15. But it trims it off and makes it a reasonable, it looks like a valid zip code. But if I do 4, 5, 6, 7, zip code's not valid. All right. So anyway, study that. If you study anything, study that particular problem between now and Monday to get a feel for how you can create simple forms and then process them in a program using the string functions. Okay, and then just to finish this up here, the notes. I mean, this is pretty simple. So, comparing strings. And I know I'm jumping ahead, but you guys have taken some programming, so you understand the basic if statement, right? If, okay, so we got this $email variable. If it's equal to, we can check if two things are equal to each other by using the equal. So if it's equal, jmbucky@genesee.edu. You know, I like to make fun of Jim Bucky because he likes to spend a lot of money on Microsoft products unnecessarily. So send Bill Gates some money right now. However, if this was entered in a form and Jim used uppercases, this wouldn't work, right? Because if he did capital J, lowercase m, uppercase b, they wouldn't be exactly equal. So the way to fix that is do a string to lower, take your string and convert it entirely to lowercase, then trim it, and then email and set it back to itself. So look at this line right here, or these two lines. $email equals get email, get it from a form, trim it, convert it to lowercase, and then check. All right, that's the way to do it. Now, otherwise, you're going to get unexpected situations. My mother filling out the form, and my dad, it was even worse. I don't think I've gotten an email from him in the last year that hasn't been entirely in uppercase, with all kinds of problems. So substrings, string to upper, string to lower, substring, basic format, just about every language uses the same. The substring of a string, start, and then length. So the starting position, the examples are substring of Hello Kitty 0, 2, starts at the 0th, which is really the first, starts at the H and returns HE. 4, 10 will start at the 4th, which is really the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4th. We start at 0, so it starts at O and does the next 10 characters. And you can even do negative, which starts from the back. -1, -2, -3, -4, I, length 2, so IT. And string position, you can figure that one out. Figures out the position in the string. And 0 if it doesn't find it. And that's it. Okay, optional formatting text. Okay, so you have your project. Get started on it. Why delay, right? Have it done by Monday, just for the hell of it. And then on Monday we'll talk about the project submission process. It's pretty simple. And any questions, let me know. I'll do a quick video of printf and sprintf if you're interested. Not required, but I'll send that out to you. I'll put it in the CIS 215 channel on YouTube. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay.